Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. And I just have to say congrats to those three teams who presented, I think, some really awesome solutions. Yeah, amazing just to see that evolution and how quickly groups who've never worked before together have collaborated and created something really, really cool. And I will say, I'm sorry, but we're in between the next three groups that are going to present. So anyway, great to meet you. Just really quickly, and TJ, you'll appreciate this. I'm just going to say a disclaimer: the views expressed are not necessarily representing those of Gilead. So,
and I'll do the same for Sanofi as well.
But no, really quickly, Gilead Sciences been around for about 35 years, tackling a lot of large public health challenges in virology. HIV treatment, prevention, hepatitis, COVID, inflammation, most recently with primary biliary cholangitis, and also in oncology, metastatic breast cancer, and large cell therapy. The group that I lead, Patient-Focused Implementation Science, we sit in the medical affairs part of the organization. So we don't work on those phase 1 through 3 clinical trials for regulatory approval, and we aren't in the kind of commercial side of the business. We are in medical affairs, so we really focus on. There's a lot of really important things that you can do beyond the clinical trial that help with adoption of innovation into practice. I think we think of this kind of in a way of medicines. This might be controversial. Medicines don't save lives, but appropriate use does. And I think we could probably say the same for digital AI, all of that stuff too. It takes us humans to use it appropriately to make that impact. We also focus on the fact that healthcare outcomes, patient outcomes are a factor of biology and structure. Biology, medicines tackle the biology piece. The structure piece is what my team focuses on. Really, what are those problems that we can address beyond the medicine by employing evidence-based approaches focused on patient activation, navigation, and person-centered decision-making. Kind of, a lot of what we talked about too with that cognitive burden and all of the things that we have to navigate. So with that, that's a little bit about why I'm here, but I have some really awesome panelists here. And I think that I would love to start by just saying, I think we all know this, collaboration in healthcare is really multifaceted. It's very dynamic and extremely complex. And so we have some people here who can really kind of share and highlight their experiences that. And with that, Marissa, I'll start with you. I'd love to hear about your collaboration and what you've done with Nicklaus Children's Hospital to, really start to address some of the mental health and behavioral health challenges that you've seen in the community and how you've addressed that.
Hello. Thank you very much, Hola, and hi to the Miami group. Let me tell you a little bit about my history. I have been a clinician for 38 years. My area of expertise is teenagers. And a little bit about Florida too, that I think is very relevant when we talk about collaboration, is that you have to think of Florida at the bottom of all the states in the United States. The per capita monies that we have access to is $36. In Maine, for example, is $365. So you see, we are a very diverse community. The hospital is a big system. We have around 300 beds. We're going to acquire now almost 200 extra beds. So we are a large community hospital. 70% of the population we see are Medicaid population. So it's a challenge, to say the least. And talking about collaboration, prior to COVID, we saw the tsunami of mental health issues with children, teenagers, and parents too. And we needed to make a decision. And the decision that we made was not too attractive for the administration of the hospital. You mentioned before that it takes a village to raise a child, and we determined to wake up the village. And that's how we did it. And we proposed that we were going to create a network of agencies in Broward, Dade County, Monroe, and we were going to refer to them our patients because we had a huge wait list. Imagine the administration. What do you mean? Market share. Are you giving patients to other organizations? And we said, yes, there is a need and there is enough. And we began with 2, 3 agencies, and nowadays we have 27 agencies. At the beginning, it was we were not liked by administration. Now we are the perfect kids for administration because we developed that engagement with the community. We service our patients. We open access to all our, or most of our patients. There is a long way to go. It was a process that very fast, I can tell you, and this has been mentioned before, it's a labor of being transparent, creating trust in the community, creating a pathway that patients were not being lost, selling the process to the patients because they want to come to the Children's Hospital. I don't want to go to another agency. They don't know me. I want to be home with you guys. So selling that component, making it a win-win situation. And the pattern or the engagement that we develop with the different agencies is we're going to send you patients according to the presenting problem, where they live geographically, the insurance that they have, and you promise to see our patients ASAP. So it was that type of collaboration that it was what I always say, a win-win situation. Why? We began with maybe having 20 clinics around town, and then we decided to go to the grassroots movement. We needed the village. So we approached parent to parent, NAMI, Sports Connect, grassroots movements that were going to help us educate the families and engage the family in the aspect of health. So that is how we, I said it very fast, but it's a long process that takes a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you. That's very impressive. And also the story of how you had to kind of go against the grain, per se, to make something happen that was actually ended up being better for everyone and not being a detriment to the system that they thought.
It was a huge risk.
Yeah.
But we took it.
Nice. Well, and collaboration by design requires getting out of your silos and working with other groups. So TJ, given everything, you've worked with probably the most diverse number of stakeholders and seen a lot of different collaborations. I would just wonder, from your perspective, critical issues to consider in navigating these types of collaborations and ideas and how they may change over time. So.
Yeah, I'm so happy to. It's good to be here today. I'm very fortunate in my line of work. I get to work with a large academic health systems all across the country. I also get to work with a lot of smaller but still very innovative earlier stage companies. And so oftentimes I'll get the phone call from the client and they'll say, we want to collaborate with this other organization, right? Or we want to joint venture with them, or we want to, partner with them. And these are all great words, but you really want to think about, well, what does that mean, right? Because everyone identifies solutions. There's whiteboarding, there's ideations. But when you really want to have the rubber meet the road, you want to be thoughtful of how you're going to go out with these other organizations out there, right? And so the one I get the most is we're going to joint venture with somebody, right? Well, joint venture is it's like the legal version of getting married, right? So you really want to be thoughtful of how you're doing that. It's very challenging to unwind. It can really integrate different organizations. If you're tax exempt, it has different issues. It raises issues of who's going to own what, who's going to be in charge of what. So those are things that very early on you want to start to think about it, because when you go too far down the rabbit hole or too far down the road, you might have this great idea, this great product, this great network. And then when you've backed up to really think about some of these critical issues, you really have to take several steps back, and it can slow you down or it can kill the arrangement altogether. So I say all that to say, be thoughtful in how you want to do this. Get involved with the different key stakeholders from the various organizations early so they can help bring to the table what that structure should truly look like. 99% of the time, I will tell you, it's not a joint venture entity, right? You don't need to do all of that. That can be challenging. Sometimes it needs to start off with a pilot. A theme that I've heard through the different panelists are, the healthcare is slow. Well, it's slow, but at the same time, the world is changing fast. So we can't be too slow. We have to be cautious. But you want to have a process where I think it was a prior panelist said, you start slow, but with the ability to move fast once you really have your footing under you. And so, the legal issues don't need to drive these things, but you want to be aware of them and you want to use it as a tool so that you can have confidence on the stakeholders on both sides. You have the bones to really have a foundation that you can then, once the partnership is really working on the operational side, you can accelerate faster and then really launch it into, geographically wider technology, more implementation. But those are I think some of the key considerations I'll say when I first get those calls of, hey, we want to work together with somebody.
Are there any, ideas are great and that's a starting point, but actually seeing it through and the reality of it, have you ever had ideas that you said, oh, that's a bad idea, just no? Or I know that you actually provide a lot of guardrails to help, bring the idea to life. So any kind of examples or ideas from that?
Yeah, I'll give three quick ones because they're different concepts that I think are interesting. One is I'm working with a client now. They have this really cool delivery. They're in the EMS space and have a really cool delivery model to help with diversion of going to the hospital. So payers are very interested. EMS agencies are interested. 911 centers, hospitals. And when you go into new markets, it's important for this company to continue to grow. And you have different folks that are interested to collaborate with. And sometimes down the road, you'll see that there's a company, in this particular case, it's a competitor in some markets, that can be a collaborative partner in others. So that's an example where you want to think about you as an organization, where do you want to go and how do you want to grow? You want to get into this new market, but you're kind of going in with a partner who you want to be careful of, are you trading up a competitor, right? Because, patients, we all have this, these missions, but at the same time, the organization also has to grow. If it's a for-profit organization, you want to sustain itself. And so that's one where you're starting to consider, is it actually worthwhile to partner with this partner? They're a much larger company. Is it worth going in with them, or is this something we have to be more cautious with? Do we need things like exclusivity? Do we need a longer term to make it sticky? The other thing I'll see often in arrangements is if you have like a 1-year term, sometimes that's just not enough. You want commitment from both sides. And so one side will say, well, what if we want to get out of it? And the other side will say, well, why invest these resources and time if it's a 90-day contract? If you have a 90 days without cause termination, it's a 90-day contract. You have all this other, the lawyers involved, you have the words on the paper. If you can get out in 90 days, what are you really committing to? So having that discussion on the business side. The other two quick I'll give is one involves right now this really cool product that an AI bot is significantly improves patient adherence in different chronic care management and remote monitoring programs. They have great outcomes. What they've learned the hard way is they were really struggling with the commercialization because they didn't realize that the reimbursement structure, at least for Medicare, a lot of the wraparound services that they really have to do is not going to get paid for. So you have this great product, but you can't make money off of it and you're losing margin off of it. And that's a very big challenge in the fee-for-service world. And then the MA and the other, capitated products are slobbering, right? What I've seen is these big health systems and the payers, they're saturated with all these different tools, right? How many times do they have to make a phone call, this new great digital health product? So it's very hard for them to differentiate. And then the last one I'll give is when you're dealing with these large organizations, their boilerplate and their lawyers are generally going to have a position of, this is our data. We don't want you to do anything with it. And that doesn't work for a lot of these AI training models. You need to have that data to make your product better so you can do a better service for the customer, the payer, the health system, the patient. And they're going to say no. And you're going to have to really educate them on why it's important to have the data and the flexibility. And they're going to be very cautious of that because they are sensitive to the cybersecurity, the privacy, the data breach world that we live in today. So again, those are the other issues to be cautious of when we're aware of.
That's super helpful and thank you. And we will not let any of those challenges slow us down, right? Ethan, would love to hear more about your experience, the work that you have done at Sanofi's done with Formation Bio, OpenAI, in terms of development in that aspect, and then other areas that you guys are looking into from a collaboration perspective that leverages AI.
Thank you, Trudy, for that. And it's really been an honor to join our esteemed panel here to discuss collaboration. But before I start, very similar to Trudy, I have to put a disclaimer that my opinions are my own and not representative of Sanofi. Also happy to chat about my personal experience as a recovering founder. So happy to chat after the conversation today. So to answer your question, the collaboration that we have with OpenAI and Formation Bio serve as really a prime example of how Sanofi is thinking about transforming drug development, leveraging AI. And so the unique, what makes it a unique collaboration is that the three parties joined together to develop a customized, really bespoke large language models that's built specifically for Sanofi's needs. And that is actually not available for commercial use, right? And so together, the three parties launched the first project, we call that Muse, and really designed to optimize clinical trial execution. So this product is not only helping to optimize the internal workflow, but it's really reshaping and how drug development will work, right? Helping to accelerate clinical trials, make it more effective as well as more inclusive. So what used to take months, right, then actually now happens in minutes. And that what really means is that it's reducing costs as well as giving us the ability to reach out to population that before it's really hard to target, right? And so what we observe is really interesting. Is even though the development of this is still an MVP phase, we are seeing the product have demonstrated really high impact. And so we do believe this is kind of the beginning of the AI innovation be able to help drive drug development within Sanofi, but then overall in the pharma industry.
That's great. Thanks, Ethan. So I think in terms of the perspectives up here, we're all thinking like ways to collaborate and ways to kind of expand and solve a similar problem and similar mission. I think, Marissa, one of the things that I'd love to hear you talk about is, as you guys have set this up, of how you help address the issue of behavioral health, adolescent issues, and how are you looking to expand that? And what are any tips for sustainment and keeping it going?
There are a few things that I want to highlight. One is that you need a process. Second, you need to be open to assess and detour. Because you're working, in our case, we're working with 27 agencies. We need to have a process that the patients that we're sending them, and we send kids, families, that they are being seen, that they are being, so you need a quality measure of the work that these agencies are doing, and we need to be open to changing, because change is coming, whether you like it or not. So we look at the strengths of each agency, which I think is so important when you're collaborating with someone. What is your strength? We come from this culture of a win-lose situation, that for me to win, you need to lose. And with this approach, we determined that we needed to go in with a win-win mentality. You are an expert in trauma. You are an expert in ADHD. You are going to help us understand, and we're going to reroute the patients, and we're going to make sure that those patients are going there, and we are going to make sure that we measure the quality of work that you're doing. And if we need to change anything in return, we'll do that. The barriers are that win-lose mentality. The barriers are addressing the trust. The barriers are that you need to be open and honest and humble. And that was mentioned in the previous panel. You need to be humble that you don't know everything, that you're there to learn. And you need to be very much in tune. And I always say you need to listen, not only to the patient population, to the agencies, but also to the community. We live in a very diverse community. 70% is Hispanics from all over Central and South America. So their needs are so different. And so we need to highlight all those. And every single patient that we send to the different agencies, we triage them. So they belong to us in a way. So they send us information via email on a regular basis. So again, it's a working process. It's all the agencies are triaged. We meet with them and we explore what are the strengths and challenges that they have as agencies. And we try to work through. In the process, we learn so much. We learn about families, we learn about kids, we learn about the needs of mental health. And let me tell you a side effect of that process. We are a children's hospital. We are only allowed to see children and teenagers at the hospital. We cannot see adults. But you know, for example, Florida is the first state in the country with the amount of adults with mental health issues. And 60% are not being taken care of. And we all know that if we have adult parents with mental health issues, we have high-risk children. So a side effect of this network is that I have the possibility not only of referring the kids, but also the parents. Because I cannot see them in the hospital unless it's in the context of the family, but those agencies, they have adult services. So that has been the barriers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not that much ugly.
Thank you. I guess the other piece that I think would be helpful is in terms of these collaborations, like unexpected learnings, and things like that. I know we go into this and to collaborate, we usually have a starting point and an expectation where we think we'll go, but then the process changes. I wonder, TJ and Ethan, also your thoughts on what, unexpected learnings and other, directions that this takes, and how these collaborations actually, ones that you've seen work out and ones that you haven't, and what you think those differences might be.
Yeah, give me the start of it. It's a good question. So I think, it's interesting in the sense that one of the key lesson that we've seen with across different collaboration is that establishing trust early, right? Because I think a lot of time when you don't know, what's the capability on how the other side works, right? And not having that trust building initially can drive really challenges in when you actually have to involve the lawyer. TJ can probably attest to that, whereby when you negotiate a contract without trust and give and take can really extend the process and really make the negotiations more challenging. And so, the other part that I found, at least for big enterprise, what's really important in large collaboration that, enterprise value could be up to $1 billion or up or more. You do need to have internal alignment with your senior leadership team way in advance. So meaning you don't wait until the last minute to have that conversation, because most likely all these decisions are made usually of a panel of either executive committee member or even the CEO, and in some threshold even to the board, right? So not having that alignment beforehand can really stall the deal. So that's kind of the what I've seen within our enterprise and across the board.
And I'll just add, those are all great comments, and I see a lot of that. I think and this is a little bit non-legal, but what I see that is very successful arrangements often have internal champions on both sides. It doesn't matter if it's a large organization or not. And then building a structure so that if that individual transitions or leaves that organization, the arrangement can live on with that trust that you just talked about, right? Because sometimes if it's all about this one person that's pushing it forward and there's not a structure in place if that person leaves, if Ethan at Sanofi wins the Powerball and goes to Bermuda, what is he leaving behind? Is there a structure in place so those arrangements can survive? So that's important. So governance of the contract, governance of the relationship is key. And then also building it so that it can be scalable. So I have had clients where they'll build it out in a state like Florida, and it's great in Florida, but what they built doesn't translate into California or Texas, either operationally or from a legal compliance perspective. And so you have to start over, and it was working so well in Florida, right? So you really want to make sure that when you're starting from the beginning, that you're creating a recipe that you can really bake throughout the rest of the country. And so that's the other thing I see.
And I think you need to also know your institution very well. You mentioned that, the CEO might be there today, but in 2 years, he's gone. So you need to find support in your institution to move forward. If not, you're doomed, basically. So that is, I think, so essential. And you have to be clear in what you want. We were clear in what we wanted. We were rejected many times. However, we found our way in our institution to collaborate inside and then move forward. And one of the major barriers was legal. I have to tell you, it was a nightmare. But that I think is essential because nowadays, I think in every single hospital in the country, there is a turnaround. It's overwhelming of CEOs and presidents and things like that. So finding that team that is going to help you move forward and understand what you want to do, I think is essential. Understand what you want.
Just one quick note to what TJ was saying. It's important to find an internal champion, but don't limit yourself to only the high up. So meaning only focus on the senior executive or the CEO. Also, it's important to target the people who are actually carrying it out, executioner. So this could be middle layer because they're the one, if you don't have internal champion, it can be delayed because there's so many different priorities within the company. If they're not the one who's driving it forward and you don't have the internal champion, it can be really challenging to even make that the top priority.
That's super helpful. And I think that not to defend the lawyers, but to kind of make a point that when you're doing something new, none of us know what the implications are. And I think that was brought up in the previous panel. We don't know the consequences, the intended, unintended, or otherwise. And so I think there's a thorough examination of those things. But it's also bringing folks along to help them understand what it is you're trying to do, which doesn't fit a mold necessarily. Before we take questions, I think one other thought from each of you about how we want to leverage this to personalize treatment more. And I think that was a lot of what we were talking about earlier today, is that what are different ways that you see us leveraging digital AI through collaborations to actually achieve that goal of personalizing care to patients and individuals and focus on things like adherence.
You want me to? Remember, I'm a clinician. Yeah. So all this is kind of new to me, but I think, and it has been mentioned before, ownership, guardrails. Who is going to supervise this technology that is here to stay? That is here to, and my concern is how are we going to educate, and it was also brought up before, our physicians in the hospital. And I need you to understand today, I was looking at my email and I have 3 modules that I have to complete before tomorrow. And it's a constant thing that you need to do this. So physicians, I want to emphasize that they are exhausted because we don't have enough physicians. They are exhausted. So it's a tool. We are going to use it because but we need to be careful in terms of how to train physicians, how to use it, how to, when we're talking about children, I'm always concerned about ethics, and I'm always concerned about the morality of the entire system. Kids don't have a voice. They do not have a voice. We are their voices. So we need to be very careful to protect them and use it appropriately, but always thinking it critically. Am I doing, and I think you go through that by peer supervision, lots of peer. And that's why the win-win situation is so important. It's for me to be humble enough and say, I don't know, TJ, help me with this, because it doesn't make sense to me. And I think a great deal of that, and teaching AI, using AI, it's okay to a point, but that peer interaction, I think, is essential moving forward.
Yeah, and I can jump in here. And yeah, AI has accelerated at unprecedented level. I think we have seen that, right? So, which introduce an opportunities, but also challenges, right? So I think the key here is to strike a balance between rapid innovations as well as maintaining regulatory and patient safety standards. So at Sanofi, we collaborate across the end-to-end value chain, from drug discovery to patient engagement, really to improve patient awareness and then really reshaping the care pathway. So one of our collaboration with a company called Bright Insight. And so, this collaboration is really to help us develop a digital disease care management platform. And this mobile app is really to empower patients to be able to really track their flares, as well as managing medical complication or recording their injections, as well as really facilitating the ability for them to interact with their care team directly, right? So what we see through this application, this mobile app, is that it really helps, introduce patients to be more aware as well as more engaged with the platform. And the result is that it's incredible that patients become more compliant to the product, as well as we see a promotion in positive health outcomes.
And I'll just add, everyone in this room probably is primed or leans towards having a higher acceptance of a lot of these technologies, or a passion or interest in them. The next couple of years are going to be, I think, very crucial, because this is now, the safety, the privacy, those are all important, because I think someone said it earlier with respect to social determinants of health, but in a legal policy perspective, it just takes one bad patient outcome and that knee-jerk reaction from a policy perspective, to really pull us back and really hinder us. So, I think it's important to have those type of mechanisms and guardrails in place. And I would call on everyone in this room to make your voices heard with your policymakers and your leaders at a local and federal level, because what I'm hoping we don't get, which it looks like we might, is this panoply of different state by state rules on this. And what's really unfortunate, and I saw this when digital health was first coming out with telehealth in 2013, you can get one bad law on the books, and a lot of these states, they'll copy and paste, right? And so we want to make sure we're involved, this room in particular, with how that process unfolds, because it will have rippling repercussions for a long time. And it's much harder to pull those back. And the laws will never, be ahead of the technology. But you can try to do the best you can to give it flexibility and not be overly constraining us here as a country in our healthcare system for these really, I think, needed technologies.
Great, thank you. I think we have a few minutes for questions if you want to do that. I know our panel is called to collaborate or not, but I think we're all leaning towards definitely collaborate.
A couple of questions. I'm Charit. I have a startup around detecting stress and providing immediate micro interventions. And I'm in the process of rolling out some pilots with enterprise. So I'm curious about what you said, Thomas, earlier about educating the legal team of the enterprise, when it comes to sharing data, do you find that education, so the first question is, do you find that the education alone is sufficient? And then my second question is, I'll just ask both questions up front. When it comes to shared IP or collaboration, has AI kind of changed that, changed the game with the with AI being prevalent there? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. So, a lot of this, so it was an earlier stage company. Generally, you'll have less leverage than your payer or health system customer. I will say education is probably the most important part for two reasons. One, you want to let the people that are operational at the internal organization, at your customer, to really understand why you need something, why you need that patient data, why you need to train the data, why you need to have this information sharing, so that they can understand, because they're looking at you because they want to have a problem solved. And so you can educate them on how operationally, from a business perspective, how that works. The second piece that I think is important is education on arming that business person internally there, how they can explain to their legal team, their other risk departments, of why it's either low risk or okay, or market, or why this is okay. Because sometimes, I'll say the lawyers will have a no first response, especially some of the big organizations, right? They have to protect this whole thing, and you have like one little sliver of a pilot program, right? So they're going to have a risk profile that's different from yours, right? So you want to arm those business people with how can they go to the legal teams, how can they go to the risk departments, and really educate them on the legal structure, right? Why this is going to be okay, why this is within the bounds. And if it's gray, you explain to them what, if any, risks there are. And then trying to shift that risk and allocating that risk in the contract. So that goes into your IP. A lot of the IP provisions generally will have stuff like work for hire clauses that basically say, you're using our members, they're our members' data. If you're going to improve your product with that, well, maybe now we have some cloud on your IP tile, because maybe we have a case for that. So you want to be careful there. And then at the end of the day, sometimes, you have to bite the bullet and say, we're signing this contract because we're going to just do really good things, and hopefully it stays in the drawer, and no one has to pull it out for that. But you got to make that business decision.
Yeah, just to do a quick add to what TJ was saying. So it's also important to educate your lawyer on when it's good enough is enough, and doesn't have to be perfect. So to TJ's point, a lot of time they err on the side of cautions than not. But you bring that business insight in terms of say, hey, this is good enough to protect our company's interests. And then, so in terms of the IP ownership, right? So the key thing I would recommend to think about is really have this, clear governance upfront, right? And then really being transparent, as well as having really well-defined agreements, right? That will carry a long way.
What do you mean by clear governance?
So, for example, one of the collaboration we did with an AI drug discovery company called Biomap. So what we do is that we set up clear governance upfront on, for example, who does what, who bring what to the table, how data are being shared, and then if there's any AI generated insights, how they're being used, right? So for Sanofi, we're also looking at to ensure that we, have our protection in place for any, IP ownership related to our biologics IP, right? For example, whereas the Biomap, their core platform is on drug discovery or on AI, right? So, we have to ensure that we leverage the AI technology while also kind of ensure that both sides have that same protection.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, right? And I think the moral of the story here is if the lawyer says no, ask why and keep asking why, right? Thank you.